I am Vactor, and he is Shoff. We're here today to talk about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, the first 2 episodes of the Netflix
We
show.
are Sex Boom! 1, 2, 3, 4.
Episodes 1 and 2 of the new Netflix show. They dropped all 8 at once, but what we're going to do is every week we're going to do 2 episodes. So this week, episodes 1 and 2, Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life and A League of Their Own. So, Shoff, why don't you start off by giving us your history with Scott Pilgrim? The movie came out in 2010, I think it was, and the graphic novels were coming out sporadically throughout the year. So what was your Scott Pilgrim experience?
Well, I think I should probably start by explaining my shirt, because for the viewers on YouTube and various social media, if we put this out as a short, it just says sex. My shirt just, it looks like it just says sex and nothing else. And then there's like a hint of something below here. It says sex, not just sex Bob. No, because Bob is my dad's name and that would be weird. No, it's sex Bob. Sex Bob. But if I were to get this whole shirt in the shot, I'd have to be standing back where my bookcases are. So yeah. But anyways, my experience with Scott Pilgrim, so funny story, and I don't know why I did this, but for some reason I sort of put Scott Pilgrim the movie, because that was my first introduction to the Scott Pilgrim world. I didn't even know it was a graphic novel first. That totally bypassed my brain. But I slept on this one. I did not see this in theaters. I thought the previews looked dumb. Like I didn't give it a chance. And I fully accept that I was an idiot because once I finally did sit down to watch it on Netflix, because it wasn't until it was on a streaming service that I even had a chance to watch it, I was like, this movie is incredible. This movie, and it actually took a couple of viewings, because the first time I was like, oh, this is pretty good. I came back to it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a revolutionary movie. This movie is something else. Like, you know how some movies you'll watch them and you're like, that defies that defies like classification, like it's in its own tier. And it's weird to say that about this movie because it's Scott Pilgrim and you wouldn't like call it a masterpiece, but it is a masterpiece. So it's Edgar Wright at his most Edgar Wrightiness, and I really enjoyed it. I loved it. And then that prompted me to get into the comic books because of meeting you, Vactor, and you were like, dude, the guy who wrote it, he's awesome. Is it Brian Lee O'Malley? Is that
yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I went, and I didn't want to get just any version. I got the color editions of all of the Scott Pilgrim hardcovers, and it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I finally collected the full 6 set.
Nice.
Because they're not out of print, but hard to find. Some of them, especially some of the volumes, are really hard to find, and they're not cheap either when you do find them. So I was thrilled to have that, and I've not read all of them, to be perfectly honest with you. I probably read the first couple just because the stack. It's hard to attack the stack when you're a young dad. Well, I'm not a young dad, but I'm a dad of young kids.
Yes.
So yeah. But that's my kind of like real like quick history with Scott Pilgrim. But I've loved it, and the Netflix show I was very excited for, even though I'm not even a huge anime fan. So
excellent, Shoff. All of that is great background for how Shoff came to view this. I was looking up the dates because I was like, man, when did the actual comics come out? 2004 was when the first volume came out, and they released all the way up to 2010 when the movie came out. And I remember standing in line for the movie and the 6th volume. I remember standing in line at the comic book shop. They had here in Arizona, they had at Atomic Comics this whole Scott Pilgrim party that they did. People dressed up, came in cosplay. They made food. We played the video game that was out at the time. So there was a ton of Scott Pilgrim stuff going on at the time. But I was very excited for the film. I was a huge fan. Actually, the comic is my favorite comic book of all time. If you just encapsulate every comic book that has ever been released that I've read, Scott Pilgrim is my #1 favorite comic of all time. And then the movie, I would say, is in my top 5 films of all time. So this is a franchise that I'm very much in the bag for, Shoff.
Yeah, it
I
sounds
played the
like it.
video game, and then
Oh yeah, the
when
video
this,
game. That's right. Yeah, I've played that. That's an unforgiving game at times because
yes,
there's no saves. There's no saves.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game is the name of the game, and it's a side-scrolling beat 'em up, which I love those type of games. But
Yeah,
like Shoff said, is very unforgiving, very classic, old school
yeah. The brawler
arcade
game. I
game.
love those
Mhm.
brawlers.
So when Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was announced, I was like, yeah, the original cast is coming back from the movie. It's going to be an anime. This is going to be great. And when I started watching this show, the first episode, Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, a little bit of dread crept over me. I was like, is this going to be the exact same as the comics and the movie? Which that's fine because, like I said, those are two of my favorite things of all time. But it runs into that adaptation thing of, okay, if it's going to be exactly like the source material, I can just go back to the source material and read the comic again. So my excitement was like through the roof at the beginning, and then it slowly, as the episode crept on, I was like, this is the same as everything else. But then the ending of that first episode, Shoff, when they took a detour and they said, all right, what if Scott Pilgrim lost that first battle against Matthew Patel? And I said, whoa, what?
Yeah.
This is gonna be something different. So then I just had, I exploded in my pants, Shove. I had a great experience watching
Jade
this.
and his pee all over his bees.
So what was your experience?
Well, you bring up a great point. So you said the words "what if," and we're about to head into, we just started December 1st is today, and later this month we're going to get a series of, I want to say, is it 9 episodes of the What If season 2?
Yes,
on Disney Plus. I think it's like running for 9 days straight or something like that. And I have a gripe with the What If show in general, that some of their what ifs are pretty bland choices. Like they don't shoot for the fences, or swing for the fences, I mean.
Yeah.
It's like, what if Thor decided to wear sandals instead of shoes? Or what if he went outside and it was cold out, but he didn't bring a jacket? It's like, we don't need those hypotheticals. Like, those are dumb. But the fact that they in Scott Pilgrim are like, what if the very fabric of the story is completely upended by having him lose in the first round against who's supposed to be the weakest of the 7 X's, and a throwaway character. Like, we never really thought much of Matthew Patel. He was in it for such a quick moment in the movie, as well as the story itself. Like, just not much to do. And then he was vanquished. And this totally changes that. And from here on forward, this alternate universe we're in, it's really, really interesting. Very interesting. I love it.
And it's kind of like getting a sequel, which a ton of people have been wanting online. They've been clamoring for a Scott Pilgrim sequel for years. Like I said, the last comic came out in 2010, which is also when the movie came out. So it's been 13 years since there's been any new Scott Pilgrim storylines or Scott Pilgrim material. So this definitely came at the right time. I was looking at some interviews, and Brian Lee O'Malley was like, I really wasn't interested in doing more, and he still isn't. He's like, I don't really want to do anything after this. But the showrunner came to him and was like, hey, let's have this happen. And what if we have this? And so that little conversation that they had just kind of stemmed off into all these branches. So as I was watching it, Shav, I think the opposite of you in as far as anime goes. So I was watching it.
You sure are.
I was saying, it's fun that this is anime, like it, which the actual comic book is based off of a love of anime and video games. That's the two, and indie rock music. Those are the 3 things that kind of make up Scott Pilgrim. So it was fitting to turn it into an anime, and all of the tropes of, the eyes getting small and the big reactions and things like that. So all of those things, I thought the anime studio did a great job at adapting it. And then hearing all of the original voice actors was fun again. Although, Shoff, I have a bone to pick.
Uh-oh.
Now, Michael Cera, I love him. Ever since Arrested Development, he's been one of my favorite actors, but he is very much Michael Cera. Most of the time, he's not doing another persona. He's not doing like another character.
Right.
He's doing
hired
Michael
because
Cera.
of his sort of casual awkwardness.
Yes. And when they cast him for Scott Pilgrim, having been a fan of the comics, I was like, that's not Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim does not act like Michael Cera. Now, he did a great job in the movie, and it was a lot of fun. But when it came time for the anime, and I'm seeing those images from the comics, I was like, oh no, this is the thing that I had earlier, where I was like, I don't hear his voice in my head when I read the comics. And watching the anime, I got the same thing. I was like, that's Michael Cera. That's not Scott Pilgrim. Those are two different people. So that was my one thing, besides it being just a straight adaptation of the first episode.
Yeah.
My one thing was the Michael Cera, but everybody else, I was like, oh, these voices are great. Everybody fits their characters. So that was my one thing that I had, Shoff. As you were watching this first episode, were any thoughts you had coming to mind of the adaptation, or is this going to be the same thing? Like, what were your thoughts as you were watching that first episode?
Well, I mean, I personally love. So when I saw that they were going to go that way with it, I thought to myself, man, that's actually really brilliant from Brian Lee O'Malley's sort of like vision, that he can see the cracks in his story should it go a different way. Like the when we get into, because we're talking about episodes 1 and 2 in this particular podcast episode, so kind of jumping around within story points. The whole goal of this 7 Evil X's is really for Gideon to get with Ramona. Like, that's the end goal, is Scott has to fight through all these so that eventually Gideon will take him down, or any of them will take him down, and then Gideon will get to swoop in. And that was the goal. And when it doesn't work out that way, the genius of this author and visionary is that he can see how much of his story falls apart and how much it changes by this one thing. And by adopting that, it creates so much new conflict, so much new stuff to go off of, so many new character developments. Really, really, really fun. And it also gives the X's more time to shine.
Yes.
Than we normally would have gotten as well, especially Matthew Patel.
Yes.
Who is proven to be a formidable opponent.
Yeah.
In a big way.
And that's something that I loved about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Every X, you get to spend more time with them as the series goes on. And so they're not just these mustache twirling black and white, villains. It's, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not as bad as I thought, and maybe there's some shades of gray here. So as I was watching it, I was like, this is, like you said, brilliant, because I'm getting to spend more time with people who are not Scott, because he's gone for a large portion of it. And we're getting to see it through the eyes of Ramona, where she's kind of doing this detective thing and trying to figure out what happened to Scott. And at the beginning, when they showed his death, his funeral scene, I was like, oh man, this is great, seeing everybody's reaction. And I've got 13 years of thinking the story went one way, and now it's changing.
Yeah.
So
brilliant.
It's a great setup, and it's a great kind of narrative device to be like, okay, we see this also in Invincible. You and I are covering Invincible on here in the Vactor-Verse. If anyone's interested, the first 4 episodes of season 2 are out, and we've got 4 more coming next year. But it was the same thing with Invincible, where the author Robert Kirkman is able to say, okay, I'm looking at this material that I wrote 10, 15 years ago. How would I change it today? Yeah. And we're seeing stuff like there's more inclusion, there's more representation in Invincible versus what was in the comic books originally. And then also kind of changing around, okay, this event happened here. This event, kind of changing the structure to flow a little bit better, and for a TV show versus a comic book.
Yeah.
That was the same thing with Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, where I felt like they are revisiting the material and saying, okay, what would it be like if it came out in 2023 and also what would it be like if Scott did not win that first fight. So both of those things I thought, also like you, I thought that was brilliant to showcase that.
It's
So
interestingly enough, in that funeral episode, we don't even see his sister like at all. There's not even a like you don't see like if she's like sad. We don't see any reaction. And actually, that was something I caught as well and it was also something I saw in an interview that Brian had conducted with. I do not know who. I don't have it pulled up on my screen. I'm just remembering from my own brain, but. He was interviewed and he was talking about how it's interesting to look at his friends and family who didn't even question what just went down. They're not investigating it any further. Ramona's the only one who sort of is carrying him in her heart and is thinking about him, and
and that's just after
unsettled.
one date.
What's that?
That's just after one date.
Yeah, after one date. There were sparks. There were sparks. So
it is funny.
So yeah, so I mean it's interesting. And then not being fazed by the fact that he turned into change. It kind of made me wonder if that's a normal thing in this universe. Like, because like it wasn't that odd that Scott Pilgrim was reduced to essentially like 15 cents or something like that, They were just burying the coins, and I'm thinking to myself, that must be just how things go in this particular universe. When you die, you turn into coins like a video game.
It's very possible that is one take on it. I've also seen people take it as that was how Scott interpreted life, and that's how the whole comic book series is being told from his perspective. So it's like, oh, what if I do something in my relationship, I'm leveling up. I'm gaining the power of love.
I like that.
So all of that is through Scott's brain of video games. So this Scott being not around, I wonder if it's still kind of you're looking at it through that lens of Scott, even though he's not there, because he didn't actually die. He's off in another, got teleported. We know he's not dead, Shoff.
We are Sex Bob. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how I'm gonna interrupt your spoilers.
That's not a spoiler. Actually, when I was watching it, I was like, I wonder for the people who, let's say this is their first time watching this and they don't have any knowledge of it, it's called Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. So he's not gone. Like the main character.
Maybe he takes off the season as soon as he's done.
So I was like, how do they create that tension of, okay, we killed the main character? How do you maintain that? And it's interesting the way that they go about it. I like I said, that what you said as well, that the one choice creates all these possibilities of what, where they could go and what could happen. And when I was watching it, I was like, I have no idea. Like, and you and I were talking about something. Was it Loki, or it was Ahsoka? I think it was Ahsoka. That's what it was. Where it was like, I don't know where this is going, and that is exciting to me. Versus, I can predict everything that's going to happen.
Totally.
So, as I was watching this second episode, I was like, this is great. I don't know what's going to happen.
It's really, it's written very funny too. I almost said funnily. It's written very funnily.
The writing is great on this.
Yeah, and the voice acting is really solid too. I really enjoy it. I do feel like young Neil doesn't sound so young anymore, but
yeah.
I was like, I laughed at myself, like, young Neil.
That was actually also, I was thinking about all of these actors being like about 10 years older. You don't hear it in a lot of their voices. A lot of them sound the exact same. So yeah, young Neil he might have been like the youngest guy at that point when it was being filmed.
Knives Chow.
Yeah, she was young.
Although to me, she doesn't sound the same. Like, maybe it's just because I haven't. I mean, I don't think I've seen her in anything else that I haven't seen her in anything. So like maybe Pilgrim. It's just the distance removed from her stuff. But like, to me, when I see her cartoon face and I hear her voice, I'm like, that doesn't line up with my memory of it. But oh well.
Yeah. Ellen Wong is her name. I'm looking her up. She's actually only been in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movies since 2010. So not like, she's, I would say
There's nothing wrong with that.
Everyone in the cast has gone on to do like big things, pretty much. For the most part, a lot of them have gone on to do Captain America, Captain Marvel.
That's actually hilarious.
Which Lucas Lee is my favorite character in this. I love the way that, and I loved him in the movie as well. But like I said, getting to spend more time with all these exes is fantastic. And it's like, I care about them more now than I did in the original movie or in the comics, where I was just focused on Scott. Now I care about the exes.
You know what's another thing you mentioned? We haven't really gotten into it because this particular ex, in terms of episodes 1 and 2, was only briefly seen, had a couple of like things to say, but I think her name is Bridget. She's the evil ex that's the girl of the group.
Yes, Roxy.
Which is one of a big reveal in the movie. Like that is sort of hinted, and then she's like, oh, actually, I'm a little bi-curious. I'm a little bi-furious, the whole thing. But that was like a big, bombshell reveal. But in this, it's not even remotely a concern. It's not like a plot point that it's a girl. It's much more established, which I think is just symbolic, not only of changing the narrative, but also adapting it to what modern relationships look like and people's affections towards others. Like it's far less black and white, like you either are straight or gay. Like there are degrees of all of that on the spectrum of who you're attracted to. And I think like it's not played for laughs. It's not played for anything other than she just happened to, date a girl in her past. Like no biggie, like whatever.
And that actor, Mae Whitman, she is one of my favorite voice actors. She's done a ton of voice acting. She was April O'Neil in the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And she's Avatar: The Last Airbender was her big thing for Katara, and she was on Arrested Development. But anyways, Mae Whitman, anytime I hear her voice, she's kind of like Jason Mantzoukas, where I just start laughing when I hear her voice. But what's up, Jack? You make a great point. That was like 2004. Think about 2004, 2005.
Yeah,
what the common conception of relationships was versus now 2023. It's crazy the amount of evolution that we've gone through.
Yeah,
and another thing, which also I was thinking about as we were watching Invincible, you and I, thinking about where I am as a person in my life in 2023. I'm a father and a husband now versus 2004, 2005, or for the movie 2010, where I was single with no children.
Street rat. Just kidding.
Scandal. I was not the same person that I am now. So it's like interesting to go back to this time period. And I was seeing some other takes online of people like, man, the early 2000s was a toxic time period, and watching this was like a bad reminder of that. And I was like, I think this is a good reminder of that was the way things were in the early 2000s. You can make a judgment on that being bad or good, but it is what it is for this. You're looking at kind of a snapshot of things. It's kind of like when we watch Back to the Future and we're like, oh, 1985, the 80s was a toxic time period, and look at the bums on the street, the homelessness and all this stuff. But it's like, it's just the setting of that story, and I'm just more interested in where the characters are going than the actual, hey, look back at how bad it was in the early 2000s than anything else. But I am loving this show so far, Shoff. Episodes 1 and 2, like we said, this is where the switch flipped, and it said, okay, we're not going to be the exact adaptation of either the novels or the graphic novels or the actual movie itself. So I am very much on board, Shoff. This was something that was like, as I could not stop watching it. As I was going through these episodes, I was like, I can't stop. I gotta keep going. I gotta keep going.
See, I hit the brakes and I was like, I'm only going to watch the episodes as we review them. So that way I don't get any like future information to like influence what I'm talking about. Like I've only seen 1 and 2. That's full disclosure. I've only seen 1 and 2. Vactor's seen the entirety of the season. So I will be slowly burning through that as we go through these episodes. But there was one line in the second episode that really stuck out to me and I had to share it. It's I think it's Gideon who says it. He says, "My nickname in high school was Fearless. I wore no fear shirts every day." And I laughed so hard because I wore no fear shirts in high school. That was a thing. Like
I did also.
Man, for that time period, no, that was the thing. It was Stussy and Massimo and no fear shirts and Billabong,
yes,
Quicksilver, all that, like that. Those were the shirts. That's what you were wearing.
Was very much of its time, and I was like you. I was like, man, I'm glad I get that reference. I think Brian Lee O'Malley is kind of a similar age to us. He's a little bit older, but not too much older than us, and so I think we get a lot of his humor and a lot of his references. But if you're not a fan of the original stuff, or like I say, if you haven't read, I should say, the original stuff, or if you haven't seen the original movie, it's still fun to watch this show, the anime, in and of itself. I think it's, even if you didn't have any knowledge prior to this, I still think the story doesn't like suffer for that. You just have more of a backstory watching the original stuff versus just going straight into this anime. But if you're curious, you can just dive right in. I think there's nothing stopping you from having a great experience. And then even if you want to go back and watch the movie, or you want to go back and read the comics, you can still do that. So I think this is a win in my book, Shoff, all around episodes 1 and 2.
So far, I'm really enjoying it. It's actually been hard to hold back and not watch the rest of the episodes. So I've been hitting the brakes a bunch.
I don't know how you did it.
Yeah. I was like, I gotta commit to this. I gotta commit. So now I can officially watch episodes 3 and 4 in preparation for next week's episode.
And no spoilers, Shoff, but episode 4 is my favorite episode of the entire thing. So you have something to look forward to. And you have something to look forward to next week here in the Vactor-Verse, because Shoff and I are going to be talking about episodes 3 and 4 of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. What did you think? Did you have any, as you were watching episodes 1 and 2 of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, what were your thoughts on the show? We're interested. If you leave a comment down below, we will always respond to it. And while you're down there leaving a comment, letting us know what you thought, don't feel shy, folks. You can always donate here in the Vactor-Verse. We have super thanks. You can do it because it goes towards the t-shirt budget. It goes towards buying new comic books. It goes towards just the money you give just gets recycled back into the show. It's a cyclical thing. So we are very happy that you are here. We are very happy to be talking about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. We're going to continue to talk about it next week here in the Vactor-Verse. So stay tuned for more. Shoff, do you have any closing words to say to our friends?
Let's see. Okay, just off the dome. We are Sex Bob. 1, 2, 3, 4.